more. Folks at the station moved with purpose, gathering bags, calling out to loved ones, stepping toward something certain. But not everyone there had a place to go. She stood near the edge of the wooden platform, clutching a worn suitcase with both hands, as if it might be taken from her too. Dust clung to the hem of her skirt, and the long journey showed in her tired eyes. She had come with hope, or at least something close to it. Now that hope felt thin, like a thread about to snap. "Please don't send me away," she said, her voice quiet but desperate enough to carry. The station master barely looked at her. He had seen people like her before. People with nowhere to go, asking for chances no one wanted to give. "I told you already," he muttered, brushing dirt off his coat as if that mattered more. "No work here, no room either. Best you move along before night falls." Night, the word landed heavy. Out here, night was not just darkness. It was cold, hunger, and the kind of silence that made a person feel forgotten. A few steps away, a man in a weathered hat stood still, watching. He held a small child in one arm, her golden dress wrinkled from travel, her tiny fingers gripping his vest. Two more little girls stood close to his legs, their matching dresses dusty at the hem, their hair tied in simple braids. They looked up at him, then at the woman, their young faces full of quiet questions. The man had the look of someone who had seen too much and said too little. His boots were worn, his hands rough, and a revolver rested at his side like it belonged there. But it was his eyes that held attention, not hard, not cruel, just tired in a way that came from caring more than one man should. The woman lowered her gaze, swallowing the last of her pride. She had already been turned away from 2 towns before this. Each time she told herself it would be the last. Each time she believed it. And yet here she was again, standing on another platform, hearing the same answer. "I can work," she tried once more. "Cooking, cleaning, anything. I won't be trouble." A couple of men nearby exchanged looks, then turned away. No one stepped forward, no one ever did. The smallest of the 3 girls tugged gently at the man's sleeve. "Pa," she whispered, her voice soft but clear enough to reach him. "Why is she sad?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on the woman, on the way she held herself together like she might fall apart if she let go for even a second. The train behind them let out a slow hiss, steam curling into the fading light. People climbed aboard, doors shut, and the world seemed to move on without waiting. The station master sighed, clearly done with the matter. "Last time I'm saying it," he snapped. "You can't stay here," the woman nodded slowly, though it was clear she had nowhere else in mind. She bent down, picking up her suitcase. It looked heavier now than it had before. Maybe it wasn't the things inside. Maybe it was everything else. She turned slightly, as if ready to step away, when the man finally spoke. "My 3 girls need you." The words hung in the air, unexpected and sharp enough to stop everything. The woman froze. Even the station master paused, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion. The man adjusted the child on his arm and took a step forward. The 2 girls at his side stayed close, their small hands brushing against his coat. They watched the woman with wide eyes, not afraid, just curious. The woman looked up at him, unsure if she had heard right. "I'm sorry?" He met her gaze, steady and certain in a way that left no room for doubt. "They lost their ma," he said, his voice low but firm. "House ain't the same. Ain't right. I need help." "They need someone." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Not pity, not charity, something else? The station master scoffed under his breath. "You don't even know her." "Don't need to," the man replied without looking away. The woman's grip tightened on her suitcase. This was not how she expected things to turn. Not after all the doors that had been shut in her face. She studied him, searching for something she could trust. Or something she couldn't. "And if I say yes," she asked slowly, "what happens then?" The wind picked up, carrying the distant sound of the departing train. The man glanced at his daughters, then back at her. "Then you come with us," he said. It sounded simple. Too simple. But life had taught her that nothing ever was. She looked at the 3 girls again. One held onto his coat, another stared up at her with quiet hope, and the smallest rested her head against his shoulder, already half asleep. For a moment, the station, The noise, the rejection, all of it faded. What stood in front of her was a choice she hadn't expected. Maybe one she didn't fully understand. She opened her mouth to answer. And then something changed. She opened her mouth to answer. And then something changed. It was not loud at first. Just a shift in the air, like the way a storm lets itself be known before the first drop of rain. The station master straightened, his eyes narrowing toward the far end of the platform. A pair of men had stepped off the last freight car, moving slower than the rest of the crowd, their coats too heavy for the weather and their attention fixed in one direction. Her direction. The woman felt it before she fully saw it. That old, familiar tightening in her chest, the quiet warning that had followed her from one town to the next. She lowered her gaze quickly, turning her face just enough to hide it, but it was too late. One of the men had already pointed. "There she is," he said, not loud, but certain. The man with the three girls noticed the change at once. His posture shifted, not in a way that drew attention, but enough that the girls seemed to feel it too. The two standing by his side pressed closer, their small hands gripping the fabric of his coat. "You know them?" he said quietly, not asking. The woman hesitated. For a second, it looked like she might deny it, but something in his eyes made her stop. There was no judgment there, just a steady kind of readiness. "They've been following me," she admitted under her breath. "Since the last town?" The station master frowned, suddenly less interested in sending her away and more concerned about trouble landing on his platform. "What's this about?" he demanded, though his voice carried less authority than before. The men were closer now, their boots heavy against the wood. One of them adjusted his hat, revealing a scar that cut across his cheek. His expression held no warmth, only the cold patience of someone who knew he would get what he came for. "You didn't finish your business," the scarred one said to the woman. "Boss doesn't like being kept waiting." A few people nearby slowed their steps, sensing something they did not want to be part of. No one spoke. No one stepped in. The woman's fingers tightened around the handle of her suitcase until her knuckles turned pale. "I told you before," she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to steady it. "I'm not going back." The second man let out a short laugh. "Ain't your choice." The man with the girls shifted again, placing himself just slightly between them and her. It was a small movement, but it changed the shape of the moment. "Seems like it is," he said calmly. Both men looked at him now, as if noticing him for the first time. Their eyes flicked to the child in his arm, then to the two girls at his side, and finally to the gun resting at his hip. "This don't concern you," the scarred one said. "It does now." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that settled over the platform. The wind stirred again, lifting dust into the fading light. The woman looked at him, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This isn't your fight." "Maybe not," he replied. "But you standing here with nowhere to go makes it my concern." One of the girls tugged gently at his sleeve again. "Pa," she said softly, "are they going to hurt her?" He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he kept his eyes on the two men in front of him. "Best you walk away," the second man said, his tone sharpening. "Take your girls and forget you saw anything." The man gave a small shake of his head. "Can't do that." For a moment, no one moved. The station seemed to hold its breath, caught between what was and what might happen next. The woman's mind raced. This was not how things were supposed to go. She had planned to keep moving, to stay ahead of the trouble, not bring it down on strangers. Especially not on someone with children. "You should go," she said quickly, her voice low but urgent. "Please, I don't want them getting dragged into this." But the man didn't move. If anything, he seemed more settled, like he had already made his choice. "What did you do?" he asked her, not turning his head. She hesitated again. The truth sat heavy on her tongue, tangled in things she was not ready to say. "Nothing that justifies this," she answered finally. The scarred man smirked. "That so?" Funny way of showing it. He took another step forward, and this time, the distance between them felt too small. The youngest girl stirred in the man's arms, her small hand gripping his vest tighter. The other two pressed even closer, their earlier curiosity replaced with something more uncertain. The station master cleared his throat, clearly wishing he had never been part of this. "Take it somewhere else," he muttered. backing away. I won't have trouble here, but trouble had already arrived. The woman took a step back, her heel catching slightly on the uneven wood. For a brief second, she looked like she might run, but there was nowhere to run to. Not anymore. Last chance, the second man said, his voice low. Come quiet or we make a scene. The man with the girls finally shifted his stance fully, placing himself between her and them without any pretense now. His hand rested near his side, not on his gun, but close enough to matter. You heard her? He said. She's not going. The scarred man's expression hardened. Then you're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. The tension stretched, thin and sharp, like a wire ready to snap. The fading light cast long shadows across the platform, turning every movement into something bigger, something harder to read. The woman looked from the men to the man in front of her, and then to the three girls who had somehow become part of this without choosing it. Her chest tightened with a mix of fear and something else she hadn't felt in a long time. A chance, but chances came with a cost. She knew that better than anyone. Why are you doing this? She asked him, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look back at her when he answered. Because no one stood up when they should have, he said quietly. Not before, the words settled deep, carrying more than just the moment. The two men exchanged a glance, something unspoken passing between them. Then, slowly, the scarred one reached inside his coat. Everything seemed to slow. The woman's breath caught. The girls went still, and the man in the hat finally moved his hand just a little closer to his gun. His fingers hovered near the grip, not rushed, not afraid, just ready. The scarred man's hand stayed inside his coat a second longer than it needed to. It was enough to tighten every breath on that platform. Then, slowly, he pulled it out, not with a weapon, but with a folded piece of paper. He held it up between two fingers like it carried weight of its own. Don't make this harder than it has to be, he said. We got orders. She's coming with us. The man with the hat didn't relax. If anything, the calm in his stance deepened. Orders from who? That ain't your concern. But it was becoming his concern, and everyone knew it. The woman's eyes dropped to the paper, and something in her expression shifted. Not fear alone this time. Recognition, regret, maybe both. You don't need to show that here, she said quickly. It won't change anything. The second man chuckled under his breath. It changes plenty. Folks like seeing things official. The station master, who had been inching farther away, stopped just long enough to glance at the paper. His face tightened. He didn't say a word, but whatever he saw made him turn his back even faster, like he wanted no part of it. The man with the girls noticed that. He noticed everything. You in trouble with the law, he said quietly to the woman. She shook her head right away. No, not like that. Then what kind? She hesitated again, and this time it lasted longer. The kind of silence that spoke louder than any answer. The kind that don't give you a fair say, she finally replied. The scarred man smiled, thin and cold. That's one way to put it. The youngest girl stirred again, lifting her head slightly. Pa, she whispered, why won't they leave her alone? He looked down at her for just a moment, his expression softening in a way that didn't reach the rest of him. Some people don't like being told no, he said. The two older girls exchanged a glance. They didn't understand everything, but they understood enough to feel the wrongness in it. The woman noticed them, looking. It hit her all at once how out of place this moment was. 3 children, standing in the middle of something that had followed her like a shadow for miles. You should take them and go, she said again, more firmly now. I mean it. And leave you? He asked. Yes. He studied her for a second. You do the same? The question caught her off guard. For a moment, she didn't have an answer. The truth was not simple. Nothing about her situation was. I've been on my own a long time, she said carefully. That's how I've made it this far. Doesn't look like it's working out too well. There was no cruelty in his tone, just a plain truth that landed harder than anything else said so far. The scarred man grew impatient. Enough talking, he snapped. We're done here. He took a step forward, and this time the movement carried intent that could not be ignored. The second man moved with him, angling slightly to cut off any path the woman might take. The man with the hat shifted again, adjusting the child in his arm before setting her down gently beside her sisters. Stay close, he told them quietly. They nodded without question, their small hands finding each other. The woman's heart pounded. This was the moment she had been running from. It always came to this eventually, a corner, a choice, and no good way out. Why me? The man asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the tension. She looked at him, confused. What? Back there? He said. You could have asked anyone? Why ask not to be sent away here? The question seemed strange, almost out of place, but it carried something deeper. She swallowed. Because I was out of options, she said. And because sometimes you can tell when a place is your last stop? And this is it? I thought it might be. The words hung there, heavy with something neither of them wanted to name. The scarred man let out a sharp breath. You two done? The second man reached out, his hand closing around the woman's arm before anyone could react. It wasn't rough enough to draw a scene, but it was firm, controlled. She flinched, instinct kicking in, but she didn't pull away. Not yet. Let go of her, the man with the hat said, his voice quieter now, but stronger for it. The grip tightened slightly. Or what? The question lingered. Around them, the platform had nearly emptied. The train was gone. The last of the light stretched thin across the tracks, leaving shadows to take its place. The town beyond the station felt distant, like it belonged to another world. The man didn't answer right away. He looked at the woman instead, searching her face one more time. You running from something? He said. Or trying to hold on to something? Her eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in her answer. Both. That seemed to settle something in him. The second man began to pull her forward. Just a step at first. And that was enough. The man with the hat moved, not fast, not reckless, but certain. He stepped into their path, forcing the grip to loosen without making it look like a fight had started. Not happening, he said. The scarred man's patience snapped. You don't know who you're crossing. Don't need to. That paper you saw, he went on, tapping it against his palm, that carries weight. More than you, maybe, the man replied. But it don't carry my girls home at night. Silence fell again, heavier this time. The woman felt it shift, the moment tipping closer to something none of them could take back. Her chest tightened, her mind racing through every road that had led her here. This was never supposed to be anyone else's burden. Listen to me, she said quickly, her voice breaking through the standoff. If I go with them, this ends here. No trouble follows you. No trouble finds your home. The man didn't look away from the two in front of him. And if you don't? She didn't answer right away, because she knew the truth. It wouldn't end. It would only begin. The last light of day slipped behind the hills, leaving the station wrapped in a dim, dusty glow. The air felt heavier now, like the world itself was waiting to see what would happen next. No one spoke for a moment. The woman could feel her pulse in her throat. Every instinct told her to end this before it went any further. She had spent too long running, too long surviving by keeping her head down and her voice quiet. Trouble followed her because of what she knew, because of what she refused to give up. And now it had reached people who had nothing to do with any of it. You don't understand what you're stepping into, she said again, her voice low but urgent. This isn't just about me. There are people behind them. Powerful ones. The man with the hat didn't shift. There's always someone behind someone, he replied. Don't change what's right in front of me. The scarred man's jaw tightened. You think this is about right and wrong? This is business. You're in the way of it. Then find another way around. The second man let out a sharp breath, glancing toward the darkening road beyond the station. We're wasting time. That small comment carried more weight than it should have. It told her something she had feared since the moment she saw them again. They were not alone in this. They were not the end of it. Her grip tightened on her suitcase again. Inside it was the only thing that mattered. The only reason she had kept moving from town to town. Papers, names, proof of something that could ruin men who thought they were untouchable. She had not fully understood it at first. She had only known it was important enough to run for. And now it had led here. The man glanced at the suitcase briefly, then back at her. He noticed the way she held it, like it meant more than anything else she owned. That what they want? He asked. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. The scarred man's eyes flicked to the case as well. Hand it over, he said. That's all this ever was. The woman shook her head slowly. You know I can't. You don't have a choice. I do, she said, though her voice trembled. The tension tightened again, pulling everyone closer to a breaking point. The girls stood huddled together now, silent, their earlier curiosity gone completely. The oldest one held the smallest hand, her eyes fixed on the woman like she was trying to understand something bigger than her years. Pa, she whispered, why won't they stop? He didn't look back this time. Because they think they can take what ain't theirs? The words settled deep, steady, and firm. The second man stepped forward again, slower now, more cautious. You're making this worse than it needs to be, he said. We don't want trouble. Just the case. The woman's breath caught. For a brief second, she considered it, hand it over, end it. Let them take what they came for and walk away, but she knew better. It won't stop with that, she said. You'll still take me. The scarred man didn't deny it. That silence said everything. The man with the hat shifted slightly, placing himself more firmly between them. Then you're not getting either, he said. You don't know what you're saying. I know enough. The wind picked up again. Stronger this time, rattling the loose boards of the station and carrying the distant sound of something approaching. Not loud, not clear, but there. The second man heard it too. His head turned slightly, eyes narrowing toward the road. They're close, he muttered. The woman's stomach dropped. So it was true. More were coming. The scarred man looked back at her, his patience gone completely now. Last chance, he said. Give it up and maybe this ends quick. The man with the hat took one small step forward. It was enough to block them entirely. No, that single word settled it. Everything shifted at once. The scarred man moved first, not with a weapon, but with a sudden reach toward the suitcase. The woman reacted on instinct, pulling it back, her body twisting away. The second man stepped in at the same time, trying to close the distance. The man with the hat stepped between them, his arm pushing one aside just enough to break the moment without turning it into chaos. It was controlled, but firm. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through the movement. For a split second, it worked. Then the sound came again, closer now, wheels against dirt, more than one. All four adults froze. The woman's eyes widened as she looked past them, toward the edge of the station where the road met the tracks. Shapes were forming in the low light, riders maybe, or wagons back up. Her worst fear was becoming real right in front of her. You see what you've done? The scarred man said under his breath. Now it gets ugly. The girls pressed closer together, the smallest one starting to whimper softly. The oldest wrapped an arm around her, trying to be brave in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. The man with the hat glanced back at them for the briefest moment. That was all it took to see the line he would not let anyone cross. You stay behind me, he told them. The woman felt something shift inside her then. Something she had been holding back for too long. Fear, yes, but also resolve. This is my fight, she said suddenly, stepping forward just a little. You don't have to carry it. He didn't turn. Too late for that. The sound of approaching riders grew louder, clearer now. Shadows stretched across the ground, long and dark. Time was running out. The scarred man straightened, his earlier confidence returning now that help was near. This ends here, he said. The woman tightened her grip on the suitcase, her heart pounding harder than ever. Every road had led her here. Every choice, every mile. She looked at the three girls one more time, then at the man standing between her and everything chasing her. I won't let them take it, she said quietly. I know, he replied. The riders reached the edge of the station. And everything was about to change? The riders came into view one by one, their horses slowing as they reached the edge of the station. Dust followed them, hanging in the air like a curtain between what had been and what was about to happen. There were 4 of them, dressed plain but carrying the kind of quiet authority that made people step aside without being told. The scarred man's confidence flickered for the first time. He hadn't expected this. Neither had the second man, whose grip loosened just enough to show doubt. One of the riders dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a steady sound. He took a few steps forward, his eyes moving from the 2 men to the woman, then to the man standing in front of her with the 3 girls. Evening, he said calmly. No one answered right away. The woman's heart pounded as she studied him. Something about him felt different from the others who had been chasing her. Not softer, but steadier. Like he already knew more than he needed to say. The scarred man recovered first. "This don't concern you," he said quickly, though his voice carried less weight now. The writer looked at him, then at the folded paper still in his hand. "I think it does," he replied. "Mind telling me what this is about?" "It's business," the second man added, trying to regain control. "Private." The writer gave a small nod, as if he had expected that answer. Then his gaze shifted to the woman. "Is it private for you too?" She hesitated. For so long she had been running, keeping everything close, trusting no one. But standing here now, with nowhere left to go and everything at stake, something inside her finally gave way. "No," she said. "It's not." The words changed everything. The writer's expression sharpened just a little. "Then I'd like to hear it." The scarred man stepped forward, anger rising again. "You're overstepping. And you're pushing your luck?" the writer replied, calm but firm. The tension shifted again, but this time it didn't feel like it was closing in. It felt like something was opening. The man with the hat didn't move, but the weight in his stance eased just enough. He glanced at the woman, giving her a choice without saying a word. She took a breath, steadying herself. Her hands still trembled slightly, but her voice came out clearer than before. "They've been after what I'm carrying," she said, lifting the suitcase just a little. "Papers, names, proof of land being taken from folks who didn't know how to fight back, signed deals that weren't fair. Money passed where it shouldn't have been." The writer listened without interrupting. "They work for men who don't want any of it seen," she went on. "I didn't mean to get caught up in it, but once I knew, I couldn't just hand it over." The scarred man shook his head, trying to cut in. "She's twisting things." "You don't know the whole story." The writer held up a hand, stopping him without raising his voice. "I'll hear from you in a minute." The woman swallowed. "I've been running ever since. Every town they get closer. I thought if I could just hold on to it long enough, find someone who would listen, maybe it would matter." Her voice softened on the last words. The platform fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not fear, not waiting. Something closer to understanding. The writer nodded slowly. "You did right not giving it up." The scarred man's face hardened. "You don't get to decide that." "Maybe not," the writer said. "But I do get to decide what happens here." Behind him, the other riders shifted slightly, their presence steady and clear. They weren't just passing through. They had come with purpose. The second man took a step back, his earlier confidence gone. "This ain't worth it," he muttered under his breath. The scarred man didn't agree, but he could see the shift just as clearly as everyone else. The balance had changed, and not in his favor. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low. "Maybe not," the writer replied. "But it's done here." For a long moment, it seemed like the scarred man might push it further. But then he looked at the others, at the riders, at the man with the hat who hadn't stepped back once, and something in him finally gave. "Fine," he said sharply. "You keep your secrets. For now." He turned, motioning for the second man to follow. They didn't run, didn't rush, but they didn't linger either. Within moments, they were gone, disappearing into the same fading light they had come from. The tension didn't leave all at once. It eased slowly, like a tight knot finally starting to loosen. The woman let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her hands dropped slightly, the suitcase still clutched tight, but no longer feeling like it might be torn away at any second. The writer turned back to her. "You'll need to bring that somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere it can be used the right way," she nodded. "I will." He glanced at the man with the hat. "Looks like you stepped in at the right time?" He gave a small shrug. "Couldn't stand by?" The writer gave a faint smile. "Not many would." Behind him, the horses shifted, ready to move again. The youngest girl stepped forward then, her small voice breaking the quiet. "Are they gone for good?" The writer crouched slightly to meet her eyes. "For now," he said gently. "And that's enough for tonight." She seemed to accept that, her grip on her sister's hand loosening just a little. The woman looked at the three girls, then back at the man. Everything felt different now. The fear was still there, but it no longer stood alone. "You meant what you said?" she asked softly. "About them needing me?" He nodded without hesitation. "Still do?" She looked down at the suitcase, then back at him. For the first time in a long while, the road ahead didn't feel like something she had to face alone. "I'll come," she said. The words felt steady, real. The girls brightened at that, their earlier fear replaced with something warmer. The oldest gave a small smile, the kind that carried hope without saying it out loud. The writer stood, adjusting his hat. "Then you've got a place to start," he said. "That's more than most get." He signaled to the others, and they began to mount up again, ready to ride out. The station, once full of tension and uncertainty, settled into a quiet kind of peace. The man picked up the smallest girl again, the other two staying close at his sides. He glanced at the woman one more time. "Home's a ways from here," he said. She nodded, shifting the suitcase to her side. "I've come farther." They started down the platform together, leaving behind the place where everything had almost fallen apart. The tracks stretched out into the distance, but for once, the journey ahead didn't feel like running. It felt like beginning again. Thanks for watching this story. Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Tell me in the comments what you felt about this story and what kind of stories you want to see next. Until then, take care of yourself and remember, even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's whole life.